Hi, this is Greg Maddox, and you're listening to Out of Left Field on the Grueling Truth Network.
Hey, guys, welcome back to Out of Left Field. We made it 2 weeks in a row, so this is definitely already looking better than it had the last couple of months. Great to have you back with us again. Graham and Chris here, and plenty of stuff to get to on the baseball docket for this week. A lot of movement as the trading deadline came and passed, a few waiver pickups, and a PED suspension rocking once again the baseball world. And even worse than a PED suspension is when it happens by a guy who isn't hitting worth a damn. So let's put the ball in play. And before we get to a lot of that side of things, Chris wanted to go ahead and open the show in a very self-serving kind of way. Chris?
I was right. The Cubs signed Lucroy, and we can now move on to baseball.
Okay, there we go. So the Cubs signed Jonathan Lucroy. He will be the veteran catching piece, which we know has been important to them in the past, a la David Ross when they won the World Series with a very timely home run in Game 7. So, a guy who has seemingly hit the crap out of the Cubs during his tenure. The other teams now will put on the blue pinstripes and join the Cubbies and a team that is struggling to find their footing. Moreover, on movement, and this is one that really has been, I know, closer to you, man, is that Joe Panik gets DFA'd by the Giants. I was kind of taken aback when I saw the initial text from you. Granted, that's just I saw it at 2 a.m. and I was sleeping. So I was just kind of, okay, I'm not sure why that happened. And then I did a little bit of looking when I woke up and said, okay, well, Scooter Gennett comes over. You got to have a place for him. Panik is a guy who, to be fair, deserves better than to be just a platoon guy. And the Giants, in a really roundabout, kind of rough business way, showed him the respect of letting him go so that he could, have a chance to play consistently elsewhere, because they know that he has, he's meant a lot to that franchise and still has a lot he can still do in the big leagues.
Well, right. And I think that one of the interesting things is diehard Giants fans are going to be upset by this. I can't say that with 100% certainty. I'm a diehard Giants fan, but I'm not terribly upset by this. Sure, I love Joe Panik. He was really an important member of the team during that 2014 World Series run. Had some timely hits, plays great defensive second base, Gold Glove winner, as a matter of fact. But he's not the guy. You know what I mean? Just like Brandon Belt's not the guy. I think that Scooter Gennett, better hitter. Maybe not quite the defensive player that Panik is, but still no slouch there at the top of the diamond. And I think that Scooter Gennett at second base daily gives the Giants a better opportunity to play better baseball. So, and I think the Mets is a good home for Joe Panik.
Yeah, it does, and he's from there. I mean, went to St. John's, so obviously from that area of town, and this works out really kind of well for New York. They pay him basically a prorated league minimum, and he's going to get the rest of his salary paid by the Giants because no one picked him up off waivers. He was, it was basically just pretty simple for them. So when you are a team like New York who tried the Robinson Cano experiment, and we both had really big trepidation and question marks about it, and then he hits a home run in his first at bat of the year, and since then has just absolutely tanked. It makes sense to add a guy who really, and you said with Panik, was really good for about 3 or 4 years, and then all of a sudden production just seemed to falter a little bit, and there was never really a clear reason as to why. And that was kind of I think the oddity of it is you look at a guy who in 2014 he hit 305 in 73 games, an all-star in 2015 hit 312, and then he hit 239. It was okay. Well, maybe it's just an odd year, maybe dealing with some injuries we weren't aware of, that kind of thing, because he bounces back to 288 in 2017. Cool. But then all of a sudden, the home run numbers drop from at least up to 10. Now he's at 4 homers, hitting 254. RBIs at less than 25. This year, only 27 ribbies and 3 home runs. All of his numbers, and granted, he is not a power guy, but when you see his slugging numbers dropping by 40, 50 points, bigger in his all-star year, which, okay, that's, that just kind of is what it is. But when you look at that dropping, his on-base percentage is barely over 300.
And to me, that's the worrying thing. The worrying thing for me is his on-base percentage, because he's always been kind of an on-base guy, right? His first year, 368. Then he was all the way up at 343. Then he was all the way up at 378. But from there, he dips off again in that weird 239 year before he bounced back up 347, right? But then, much like his batting average, he kind of drops off the table to just barely above 300. And then this year, 250 on base. We're talking about a guy who almost never strikes out. So, you would think that.
Yeah, 250 on base with the Mets.
This year, that's with the Mets.
309 for the year. But I was going to go exactly where you went, is his strikeout to walk ratio is almost 1-for-1, which means that if he's not walking, he's just not getting on base.
Right.
He's not working himself on, his hits. 81 hits. He hasn't crested 100 hits in a season since 2017, where he had 147. Even then, that was the highest number that he's had in a year. And granted, he played in 138 games. So there really is just a little bit of
he also hasn't broken 110 games since 2017.
Right. 102 last year. And we know that there were some injury concerns, which kind of, it worked its way around to that year. And I'm thinking, okay, the injury concerns are there. He's going to get healthy. Maybe this is a year that's just not the Giants year and he comes back. But he never really seemed to be able to get his feet back under him and find kind of the lightning in a bottle that happened when he first made it into the big leagues. And, of course, was a big part of the 2014 World Championship, that big double play, and I think it was Game 7 that went to review. And, of course, you can watch the review on the Third Team documentary, and they get the out at first base. It was something it was a fingertip just above the bag.
Right.
The ball into the back of the mitt. I mean, it was split second kind of stuff, but his glove was what really made him. And it was, man, this guy can play defense. He can hit decently well. And then unfortunately he just kind of fell back to earth and hasn't picked himself back up.
Yeah. And I think that new places, new faces, new team may be good for him. Right. I also think that it's good for the Giants. I think it's good for Joe, and it's good for the Giants. So do I hate to see him go? Yeah, I do, just because of that little bit of sentimentality that I have,
Sure.
I hate every time I watch one of the guys from one of the World Series teams of this past decade go. My sentimental side's like, oh, that hurts, But as a fan of baseball, as a fan of the Giants, I like this move.
I like the move, and also what I'll say is Panic is still kind of a young kid, right? I mean, he's 28, I think, 28, 29, something like that. So the Giants were becoming a much older team. I kind of like that he might be looked at as a bit of a veteran piece on that Mets club because of the ring. But when you have guys like Pete Alonso and you have some arms behind you, you're going to be looked at in a certain way, but there is still room for him to learn. And if he keeps that mentality of, I'm not producing the way that I was, and now I have a chance to go somewhere and kind of learn, relearn how to produce and be successful, then there is still a good 5 or 6 year window for him to get another deal and at least make some money. He's not going to be the life altering contract kind of player.
No.
But, I mean, hey, I don't know about you, but a base salary of $3.8 million would sure as hell change my life.
Yeah, he's never going to be a $300 or $400 million a year guy. But
so what you're saying is he has to. Well, actually,
$100 million contract guy.
Well, I mean, but wouldn't he though? Because he's not producing to about the same rate that Bryce Harper fails to produce. So, I mean, he might be on the. I'm sorry. I'm gonna go into timeout on that. I'll go into timeout for a minute on that one.
Fair enough. I think that if he could convince the rest of the baseball world that he's possibly one of the greatest players of all time by having a bounce back MVP season, he might get a $400 million deal, and then he could just go to a mediocre team and play as a mediocre player and rake in the cash, like Bryce Harper, or any 5 other guys with $350 million deals. We're looking at you there, Stanton.
And the injuries there, man, you've got to be really. I'm just saying, you've got to be sweating bullets if you're Brian Cashman.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I think that you.
I mean, not literal bullets.
If you're Brian Cashman right now, you would rather be sweating bullets than the alternative,
which is looking down the barrel of 9 firearms.
Yes, because it was almost very bad for Brian Cashman very recently, as he was pulled over at a gas station on suspicion of of being in a stolen vehicle, his stolen vehicle, which was reported stolen and returned to him. Unfortunately, the police forgot to delete the stolen vehicle information from their files and made this mistake.
So basically, forgive me as I don't recall all the acronyms for what everything goes into. Basically, the database for stolen vehicles, VINs, that kind of stuff, it goes nationwide.
Sure.
And the NYPD oopsied and didn't remove it from that database. And Cashman said, quote, "I had a welcoming committee descend upon me as I pulled out of that gas station," close quote. And to the worst part of the whole shindig is that, man, he's in Connecticut.
Right.
And let's be honest, probably not the biggest fan of the pinstripes.
Yeah. Yeah. The last thing you want to do is be pulled over on suspicion of felony grand theft auto and be drawn down on by 9 Red Sox fans as the GM of the Yankees.
Yeah. I mean, and what I would probably just holler out the window, guys, I'm going to hold up a white flag and surrender, the same thing the Red Sox did this year. And I don't know if it would go that well. But I'm just saying,
Not very nice, but most things that are true aren't very nice.
I mean, when you're 15 games out of first place and 5.5 out of the wild, I mean, hey, the fact that Boston right now is over 500 is a tip of the cap. I mean, at least give them a tip of the cap.
Interesting to me that Cashman hasn't come out and said something to the effect of, "I'm glad I made it away from all those Red Sox fans with guns," because that would be hilarious.
Well, yeah, but you look at it, Brian Cashman is a savage in that driver's seat. He is a savage in that Jeep.
Savage in that driver's seat, absolutely.
But to be fair, in a world, and we make light of it, but in a day and age where any kind of police action is often met with immediate ridicule, even when it is done the proper way, which you and I talked about, and that was done the proper way. When it shows up stolen, you're going to address that vehicle as it is most definitely stolen. And when you don't know who's in it and you don't know what they did, you're going to get as many people behind you as you can because you want to make sure that you are not outmanned and outgunned if it ever came to that. And Cashman said, quote, let me rephrase that. This was said, quote, they were clearly very professional and trained, and they asked me to turn off my car, exit the vehicle, walk backwards towards them. They were executing their duty, close quote. Cashman told the Post. They searched my car, asked for my ID, and I told them what was going on, which is exactly what you should do. It's what you would expect is, you'll have multiple vehicles, but you'll have pretty much a funnel with two vehicles with their driver's side headlight and passenger side headlight kind of facing each other with about a 6-foot gap in between. Then you're going to be told to walk back towards the sound of one person's voice on the speaker coming out of the front of the vehicle, and then they will go ahead and detain and then figure everything out, which is, again, exactly what they're trained to do. And it's what has been trained for decades. So everything was handled well. Cashman obviously complied the way that he knew he needed to, and everything was good to go. And they got a good laugh. And hey, Cashman got one more win. They didn't get to catch and keep him.
Well, they weren't in New York, so catch and release isn't really an option.
I'm just saying it is a good thing. This is not right after Johnny Damon signs with the Yankees, because like you have that. Oh, stealing Damon, now stealing Jeeps, huh? I could picture this being a bit of a longer stemming incident. He might be sitting outside for a while.
I mean, true.
So yeah, I saw that story and I was
we're so gonna get yelled at.
All I see is why in the hell is there a headline that says Brian Cashman removed at gunpoint from stolen vehicle? What? Which again is not at all the way that it was not at all what happened. It was, but I just kind of found ironic the attempted, the way the headline always reads to get you to click on it and then go, oh, that was kind of anticlimactic, like the Red Sox.
Yeah, like I was looking forward to like something like dramatic going on, like Cashman. I'm sure the Red Sox were looking forward to something dramatic going on, like Cashman broke some important law and because of that is being detained at gunpoint, and it looks like the Yankees aren't going to make any more big signings anytime soon because Cashman's gone.
Which works out well because, hey, the trade deadline is over, so they really can't until free agency. So, I mean, this was really the best time for Cashman to decide to do that if that had been the case.
Right. Fair enough.
Oh man,
we just lost all of our Yankee fan listeners.
I mean, did we? To be fair, we were blasting on Boston way more than blasting on the Yankees.
And to be fair, we probably don't have any Yankee fan listeners.
I don't know. I think we have a few. I hope we do. I hope everyone is listening. And at the end of the day, I really hope everyone's getting a good laugh out of it. And at the same time, in the serious note, I do tip my cap and applaud Brian Cashman for in something like this hopefully being a voice of reason that makes you go, okay, you know what, you can all raise your eyes. Well, what was that? But nope, they did their job. They were supposed to do. Here's what happened. Everything's good, and that is that's a big thing in this day and age.
Yeah, no, it is. It is.
So towards a guy who actually did break a rule and is going to be punished for it, and granted was not pulled from a vehicle, but he was pulled from a team, and that's Tim Beckham of the Seattle Mariners getting an 80-game suspension under the Joint Drug Prevention and Treatment Program, testing positive for stanozolol, a banned PED. Good job, Tim Beckham.
Oh, by the way, Tim, if you're going to use PEDs, you should probably use ones that help you not hit 237.
Yeah.
Just saying. If you're gonna get suspended for 80 games, you better be hitting 316 with 29 home runs. I don't want to see this 287 or 237 stuff.
This is a guy who has not hit over 300 in his career. Hell, he has not had an entire season where he has hit higher than 280, 278 in 2017. That was when the Tampa Bay Rays sent him to Baltimore. Other than that, he has been a very just bland kind of hitter. And you looked at last year in Baltimore, he hit 230. Like I said, 278 in 2017, but then 247 in 16, 222 in a half a season in Tampa Bay in 15. This has not been a guy who has been a consistent player. And you look at how he has played for Seattle this year. He has played first base, second base, third base, shortstop, left field, and been the DH.
Wow. Well, I mean, realistically, he is a jack of all trades, master of none, I think, is a safe thing to say about Beckham. And usually when we have this conversation about a guy getting suspended for PEDs, we talk about the kind of ramifications it's going to have for the team.
Right.
It's going to be bad for, it's going to be bad for the Pirates. Starling Marte is an asset. You're not going to win as many games with him off the field as you are with him on the field.
Sure.
That I don't think is the case here.
I mean, we never said it was going to be a shot in the arm or a shot in the glute, but we thought it could seemingly be a decent acquisition for a team that was making the transition from Robbie Cano and then using D. Gordon and that kind of thing.
Right. So all in all, it's news because it's a PED violation. It's his first one. If he does it again, he's gone for a year. If he does it after that, bye. But he says that it was a tainted product that he got from a trusted source. I would really, really like to hear a different excuse at some point. Right. Or, and I know this is crazy. I know this is a little off the wall, but maybe. What if he was just like, yeah, man, I did it and I got caught. My bad. Just maybe. That would be refreshing, I think. Like, that would be a breath of fresh air, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, and the irony here is I asked you, we talked about, so I wonder what tainted substance he thought he was getting. And you kind of laughed at me, and then sure as hell, there it goes. And this is Tim Beckham's his statement via the MLBPA communications handle on Twitter at MLBPA_news. And Tim Beckham said in a statement, quote, "I was recently notified that I had tested positive for stanozolol, a prohibited substance under MLB's joint drug agreement. I was given a product from a trusted source who had advised me that it was safe to take. Regrettably, the product was tainted. I exercised my rights under the joint drug agreement and presented my case to an independent arbitrator. While I am disappointed in the result, I respect the ruling and understand my responsibilities under the joint drug agreement. I accept full responsibility for putting myself in this position. I sincerely apologize to the Mariners organization, the fans, my teammates, and my family for this mistake. I look forward to resuming my career once my suspension has been served." Close quote.
Right. And that is a very well-written response. But it's not what I think people at this point are really wanting from players who get caught using PEDs, which
if you didn't do it. If I didn't do it, I'd be like, no, this is a bunch of crap. You can say this whole thing works, but it doesn't. I didn't do this. I'm being falsely accused. Here's what happened. I didn't have this happen to me. And now I'm going to be looked at for life as a cheater, and I am not. I mean, I don't know. Maybe that's me, but you accuse me of something that I didn't do. I'm going to have an absolute conniption fit over it. And he seems so, maybe you want to say he's contrite, but it's one of those things where at the end of it, I don't know. I would not be as okay and understanding and respectful of the process if I was being unjustly accused and then therefore punished and always going to be looked at by some as a cheater.
Yeah, and that is exactly what is going to happen here. He's going to this is going to follow him for the rest of his career, assuming, his numbers are bad.
Assuming he has one?
Yeah, he's kind of a peg to fill a spot. He's not like, he's not like a star player. So assuming he still has a career, when he comes back, this is going to follow him. And that almost hurts more than you know, it almost hurts that he's taking this tack more than it would if, in my opinion, if he was just like, yeah, man, I screwed up. And because this is like the non-apology, right? When someone says, I'm sorry you feel that way, they're not apologizing for what they did. They're apologizing because they're telling you that they're sorry that you feel bad because of something they did. They're not telling you they're sorry for what they did. They're just saying, I'm sorry you feel like that. That's not an apology. That's a brush off. And that, I feel like his statement, while well written and well worded, was a brush off of exactly what is going on here. And
Yeah,
that is,
I agree with. I mean, you know, I get it from the, you know, the PR is going to be, well, let's just go ahead and move on from it, but you don't really hear guys fully own it. And at some point, you know, it's one of those. Would you almost? I'll ask you. Would you almost respect it more if it was, you know, this game is really competitive. I've been fighting my whole life to get here, and I'm here, and you know, I'm trying to do. You know, I made the choice to try and do whatever it took, just so that I could make sure I could try and keep my career going.
I think so. I
mean, it's like, okay, well, damn, dude, but at the same time, hey, if you had a chance to play a pro sport, you'd want to stay in it.
Yeah, absolutely. And it is a competitive sport. And I think people might not be more understanding, but at least they would be like, hey, at least he owns it. You know what I mean? Like, at least he's not trying to like, oh, well, this guy gave me this cream and it was steroids, but I didn't know. I think you're right. I think hearing guys own it is going to be something that fans are going to want to hear.
You know, especially when it's, you know, and that was my argument, and I go to football here, but when Ray Lewis came back the last year and they won the Super Bowl, and they said he used that deer antler spray stuff
Sure.
on a I think it was a torn tricep or a torn bicep, whatever it was, and it was just, oh, well, it's just, you know, it's just, I think it's a natural spray. Don't ask me how it's made, what all it is, but it's one of those banned things that you really can't test for. I'm like, wait a second. You know, or Andy Pettit, to keep it back to baseball, saying that he took steroids to heal his ankle. Now, I know you said that what he was taking was probably not used to heal, you know, in the way of healing an ankle. But
right.
When you are dealing with pain or a loss of range of motion and you need to get better quicker, it's one of those where, you know what, I mean, is it giving you an advantage? Could you get back faster? Yeah, I guess. But, you know, do you fully blame them? I mean, yeah, you hold them accountable, but man, I can kind of get it when you know how fleeting that career can be if you don't manage to be the lucky guy and you want to find a way to try and stay in it as long as you can. At some point, I think for a lot of these guys, it stops being about the money. And sure, in some ways it is. But for these utility guys, they're just playing because they love the game. They have a chance to play at the highest level possible and do something that they thought they never would.
Right. And it's hard to, in my opinion, it's hard to justify cheating. I know people get all upset when I call it that, but it's hard to justify doing it from an outside perspective. But people got to understand that when you're in it, like when you're in this world, when you're in this life, and your entire livelihood is based on playing a game, and in order to be paid well to play that game, you have to be at the top of that game. That's a lot of stress. That's a high stress situation, and guys, you know, they don't respond well to it.
Right.
And they make poor decisions, and they make bad choices. But I think one of the questions we got to ask ourselves is how willing are we to condemn forever one group of players and not condemn another group of players, right? Because there are players now who have been suspended for PED use who in the future are going to come up for Hall of Fame eligibility.
Right.
And we have to ask those questions now. Like, okay, the era is tainted, right? The steroid era is tainted. And we can all kind of agree on that. And there are people who are like, well, let him in anyway. And you know, I'm not that guy, but there are people who are like, well, we should let him in anyway. But in the same breath are like, wow, you got to discount at least 3 years of Starling Marte's performance before you can consider Hall of Fame worthiness. Well, wait a minute. If you're a let him in anyway guy, how are we discounting any years?
Sure.
You got to be both eras have to be treated the same way.
Right. And again, we're not looking to take it down the steroid rabbit hole, but it is, at the end of it, I can understand the wanting to. What do we always hear in the Army, right? You ain't cheating, you ain't trying.
Right.
So I understand they want to stay in it. At the end of it, it is on him to deal with the fallout of his actions, and that's what he will have to do.
Yeah, and it's going to be tough. I mean, he's the kind of player that this is going to be more difficult to recover from.
Right. And now, on the flip side, unfortunately, a guy who also is out for hopefully not an extended period of time, but somebody who has made a full career out of their time in the big leagues is Nelson Cruz of the Minnesota Twins, a guy who was, tearing the cover off the ball. One of the dumbest things that we had seen. He was hitting .333 with 16 dingers in his last 25 games. Yeah, he had a 900 slugging percentage, which is just nuts. A 1.329 OPS in 106 plate appearances. I mean, just absolutely playing fantastic. And then unfortunately, he gets hit on the hand and has been diagnosed with a ruptured ECU tendon. Apparently what they say is most say that it is not as bad of a problem as it sounds like. Most have played through it, and Cruz says he is not experiencing any pain at the moment. He is going on the 10-day IL just to go ahead and make sure that that everything's okay, but he should potentially be able to return after that brief IL stint.
But this is something that could not happen at a worse time for the Minnesota Twins at all. We're talking about a team who is tied for the top spot in the Central with the Cleveland Indians, who are galvanized by the acquisition of Yasiel Puig, who's playing well as he does. Like I've always said, great baseball player, not such a great person.
Well, I think he felt bad for Nelson Cruz because he apparently tried to, I guess, kiss the injury, kiss the boo-boo, make it feel better.
He didn't. Please tell me you're joking.
I am. I mean, I would laugh hysterically but I was talking about the steal of second and third on the error, and then he blows a kiss to the.
Oh yes,
to the
yes,
dugout.
yes. He I was talking to Graham earlier while we were talking about the show earlier before we got on, and I was watching this video of Yasiel Puig. He's standing on first base, and pitcher throws over, muffs the throw, ball gets behind the first baseman, and Puig goes from first to third on the error. Well, as he rounds second base, he turns and waves to the Twins dugout, and then slides into third head first, and then hugging the bag and blows a kiss to the camera. So maybe you're right. Maybe he was trying to help Nelson Cruz out.
But you're exactly right. I mean, this is a guy who has had a career, some kind of weird career resurgence, and maybe that's just because he went to the cesspool that is Seattle, and that was what happened. But I mean, even then, he was still hitting. He was a 3-time All-Star with Seattle, barely creeping under 40 home runs in his time there. Hit 37 dingers last year, but then the year before, 39. In 2016, 43. So, I mean, this is a guy who is certainly not he is not slowing down at 38 years old. Already 32 home runs this year in 87 games. That's dumb.
Yeah, I mean, this is bad for Minnesota. This is bad for the rest of Nelson Cruz's season. Hopefully this is something where he's on the DL for 10 or the IL for 10 days and he comes back and is still just rocking.
Right.
Because going into September, Minnesota's going to need Nelson Cruz.
Oh yeah.
They're going to be fighting for their lives in that Central Division against the Indians, and that's a race that I want to watch with Nelson Cruz in it because I think it's going to be a lot of fun.
I mean, this is a guy right now who's really is having an overall career year. I mean, hitting 294, highest he ever hit was 318. I mean, or 330 rather than 08. That was in 31 games. So in an actual full season, 318 the highest he's hit. So he's hitting his second highest average of his career through the first 87 games. He's, I mean, you're looking at a guy who has an OPS of 1.035. That is the highest of his career. He's slugging 650. That's the highest of his career. I mean, it's just something in Minnesota. It's clicked for him. 95 hits through 87 games. His highest hit total in a season was 178. He was pretty much on a pretty good pace to find his way there again. Now, RBIs, that's even scarier. He only has crested 100 RBIs 3 times. That was in 14, 16, and 17, 108, 105, 119, respectively. He has 76 ribs already.
Right.
So,
and I'll say this. One of the other things that we talked about when we were planning was we were talking about top 5, bottom 3, which we will get to. Something that I think maybe in all the time that we were away, almost forgot that we do every week.
Like, last week there was that thing.
But when we were talking about top 5, bottom 3, we were talking about how many teams you could make a case for in that top 5 are playing really well and are really close to being in position to make the playoffs. And if this is a serious thing and he's gone for a little while and the Twins start to slide, they have to remember they're only 3.5 games into that wild card slot. And there are a couple of teams, Tampa Bay, Oakland, who are right on their heels, half a game out of the second wild card slot, and 3.5 games out of that first one.
I firmly believe they need to win the division to have a good chance at a longer run in the postseason. I think having to go into a wild card game really puts them behind the 8 ball, and being able to win the division is really where they need to focus on that goal.
And Oakland and Tampa Bay are teams that can absolutely beat Minnesota on any given day.
Sure. Tampa especially.
Yeah, especially Tampa.
So, all right. So you wanted to talk about this. I saw it yesterday. I read some of the article on it. It was a mistake. The umpire made a mistake. Thought he heard one thing. And again, that's the hard part of chirping. They don't have rabbit ears, but at the same time, you know what? When guys start jib-jabbing, umpires are going to hear it and they're going to knock it off. So Chris Siegel, a AAA fill-in umpire, he is up in the big league. I actually didn't know he was still a fill-in because he's up there so much. I see his name all the time. I thought that he was already a full-timer, which just to give you a thought here, okay? He's a fill-in umpire. He is 37 years old.
Oh, wow.
Still trying to find his way into the big leagues.
Wow.
How hard it is as an umpire. Just perspective. I mean, and that's, you're assuming he even got into, I mean, hell, Chad Whitson, who just got hired into the big leagues, I think, was in minor league baseball for 12 or 13 years. He just got hired full-time with Mike DeMuro's retirement a couple of weeks ago. So Gardner was in the dugout again, not surprisingly, banging his bat onto the dugout roof.
As he is wont to do.
Right. We have seen that consistently happening. And apparently Cameron Maben was chirping at Chris Siegel. Only problem is Siegel turned and said, you're gone. And when Boone asked him who, he said Gardner. And said, I heard him say it. That's a tough one. You're trying to pick voices out of a sea of Yankees fans, and at the same time you're in a game, and then you throw them out. And according to what players say, to what the cameras picked up, it just didn't work. And for Gardner to say, quote, I didn't even open my mouth, which is unusual for me. He just wanted to assume or wanted to take a guess, and he was wrong. And then he lied to me about it, which is a huge problem, and that's what made me a little upset, close quote. Now, the lying part, I would say maybe just a bit of a stretch, but I completely understand most of it.
Yeah, I do too. And you got to understand from both perspectives, right? And I think that's probably one of the places where this argument falls off a little bit. Sure, Gardner knows he didn't say anything. There's the guy next to him. You can very clearly see it in the video that the guy next to him says, come on, curse word, do better, right? And if the umpire knows that Gardner's chirping in the dugout and pounding his bat on the roof and all that stuff, it's easy to make the mistake of, oh, crap. He said something that I can't allow. I got to toss him. And maybe it wasn't him. I can understand that in the moment, right? Is it the best? Is it right? Is it okay? Is it wrong? Those are distinctions that you can't really make unless you are Brett Gardner or the umpire, right?
Right.
But I also understand Gardner saying, when he comes out and says, hey, I didn't say anything, and then feels like he's not getting listened to, I can understand him being upset by that as well. And I can understand fans and other people being upset by an incident like that. What we can't do is we can't allow, after the fact, after everybody knows all of the facts, because in the moment, that's not the case. We can't allow after the fact for people to start ripping each other, people to start ripping umpires or Brett Gardner or anything else like that for something that was, for lack of a better term, a bang thing, right? Umpire heard something, thought he knew, thinks he knows who said it, turns around, tosses him. Okay, that's what happened. You're just gonna have to deal with it. So I think it's an interesting situation just because it's kind of funny to say, oh yeah, Brett Gardner got thrown out of a game for saying something to an umpire and he never even said anything. Ha ha ha.
And the thing here, and I get the point that he wants to make here. I do disagree though, because of how at this point it was a pretty egregious mistake, just because you can tell that he wasn't saying anything and somebody was, and we've seen this kind of thing happen before where the wrong guy gets penalized for what somebody else is doing, right? Strikeout happens, you're kind of dealing, okay, whatever, and somebody else is hollering about it, then you turn around and say one thing, and then the batter ends up being the guy who gets thrown out because the umpire's been hearing, and then turns and sees you say one thing, you get the boot because you kind of pay for the consequences of others, which again, it's not a perfect world, but baseball isn't a perfect game. We get that.
Wait a minute. Let's not go that far.
It is a game of error played by humans who fail 7 times out of 10, and umpires who are right 97% of the time, more often than not, on balls and strikes calls, and it's still not good enough. That is a game of baseball. Okay.
Yeah.
And Gardner says, quote, when asked if they thought any consequence might be coming, and Gardner said, quote, of course there's not going to be. No accountability whatsoever. Probably doesn't even have to talk to anybody about it, unfortunately. Wanted me out of the game, and that was that. Just be better at your job. It's an example of a young umpire, and the game's moving too fast for him. Some guys are getting in his ear, close quote. And that I disagree with. I very, 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 very strongly disagree with him on that. I think there will be some discussion, and Joe Torre is notoriously not a supporter of umpires in any way, shape, or form. But the fact that you're saying that, it's just a young guy, too fast. No, this is a guy who's been up there for a long time and has been fighting. He's been working since 2014 in the big league, splitting time. And he's getting close to that point where he needs to get hired or he may get released. What I would hate to see is baseball go, well, this is what happened. We can release him and that'll kind of smooth it over. No, you don't. That's not the way it works. If you think he's a capable umpire who made an oopsie, the last time I checked, Fielding Colbreth, who is a crew chief, found himself suspended 4 or 5 years ago, along with the rest of the 3 men on his crew, because they allowed an illegal pitching change by Bo Porter and the Astros that shouldn't have happened. And Major League Baseball said, you know what? This is an egregious mistake as an umpiring crew, and you are all suspended. So to say that nothing's ever going to happen and he doesn't know how to do his job, I disagree. I think that that's frustration talking. And as the media, you love frustration because it makes for hot takes and good sound bites.
Right.
I disagree with what he's saying there.
I agree with you. I don't agree with him at all. First of all, I think it's an unfair representation of what actually happened. And I think it's important and almost incumbent on both sides for them to be as clear as possible with what actually happened, and not start assigning, you can't say something like, oh, somebody's in his ear. You're assigning, you're putting words in other people's mouths, and you're just not being as true to the actual incident as you need to be in order for both of you to move forward from here. Saying something like that and Joe Torre hearing it is the kind of thing that could absolutely end in the release of that umpire, and that is not right.
Yeah, and I don't want to see that. I think Chris Siegel has been working it a long time. He, I think, is a very capable young umpire. He looks a lot younger than he is, actually. But, again, it's a hard road to get into, and that's the thing. And that is, I will say this on the beauty of our show, and I've always felt this way, the fact that we both can look at this whole thing from 2 different perspectives. But I don't disagree with Gardner completely, because I get that. And I'll say the same thing. If you're Siegel looking at the back end of it and they asked Gardner if he would be interested in apologies, nope, not interested. And you know what? You can say what you want, but don't be an a-hole. If Siegel goes in the clubhouse and goes, okay, let's look and see what's going on, and you got to fill out the report. But if you look back at the tape and go, I thought this person said, this person said this. Upon looking at reviewing the film, everything that happened, it's clear this was not the person who said it, and the mistake was made. And he's big enough to go, hey, you know what? This is what I heard. I was wrong. Just let him. I mean, you're talking about not being big enough to to own it, and there won't be anything. Yet at the same time, you're saying that you don't give a damn if he comes back and says, hey, my fault. Well, then what do you want? You just want right. I mean, do you just want him to go ahead and hang him out to dry and say, it sucks to be you? Because if that's the case, just stop talking to the media at that point, man. I mean, Brett, I get it. I get being frustrated, and I agree with you to an extent. But when you say you don't give a crap if he apologizes to you, then you are saying that even if he holds himself accountable, you don't want to hear it. But you want Major League Baseball to hold him accountable, and you're going to just assume that they didn't care. They just did whatever they wanted to do.
Well, and you want Major League Baseball to hold him accountable up to and including the possibility of his job. And
right. Did you have? I mean, you have no recourse.
Had you said something, had you been ejected for reason, and had all of this been on the up and up, right? You're not going to lose. Brett Gardner's not going to get kicked out of Major League Baseball for cursing at an umpire.
Right.
But he's asking the opposite happen in the umpire's case. Or he's saying things that could lead to the opposite happening in the umpire's case.
Right.
And you know, more responsible than that.
And I am not against the idea of baseball finding a way to hold umpires accountable for certain things. And we saw it, and it's rare. I mean, the last time I can fully remember it was when Bob Davidson was suspended for when he had, I think, 2 face-to-face big blow-ups with I know one was Charlie Manuel and the other was, I believe, either Eric Wedge or Joe Madden. Mm-hmm. And baseball suspended him. It was like 2 big blow-ups in a couple of days. It was, you can't be doing this. You know, this is not the decorum of an umpire. You know, we're not back into the old days kind of thing. And that was kind of the old way of doing it. And you'll still see Alfonso Marquez do it every now and again, you know, but you expect you expect to see guys come out there and flip, but then the umpires stay composed. And every now and again, you know what? You might get a guy who goes ahead and just gives it right back to you.
Right.
Don't look sideways at that guy. No. If you're going to come out and argue and you want to fight and say what you want to say, then you know what? If they both go at it, cool. You're still leaving. You know, you did your job. He's doing his job. His job isn't over yet. Neither is yours. You're going back to your clubhouse and you're going to watch the film. Let's just get away day and you have a fishing trip. That's a different story.
Right.
I say that because that is an actual
story.
All right. Yeah. You know, and I think it was Whitey Herzog back in the 80s. And it was either Bruce Fremming or Don Denkinger that told the story, but they said that they tossed him at the plate meeting, and it was like, what the hell crawled up his butt? Like, what's the issue? And whoever it was that came out there and said, it's getaway day. He's got a trip to the cabin for a couple of days. So I think he wanted to leave early. I guess most of the club. I guess most of the club knew that was going to happen anyway, but it's just one of those, you gotta love it.
That's great. Hey, by the way, I have a fishing trip to be at with my nephew. You can just go ahead and toss me right now.
Gotta love it. All right. So we mentioned it. We've teased it. We've gone back and forth. As we are normal to do around here, we will touch on the MLB standings in just a minute, but I think going to the top 5, bottom 3 first prior to the standings is probably our best way to do it. So let's go ahead and lay it out. Do you want to go ahead and lead it off, or do you want to hear? You said you might have something that might blow me away, so should I go ahead and drop mine first so I can be prepared for yours?
I don't know necessarily that it's going to blow you away. I think it's the kind of thing that you're going to say, I don't necessarily agree.
Okay. All right. So I'll go ahead and let mine fly, and then that way I give you some time to convince me why you're wrong.
Okay, sounds good. I love making sure you know you're wrong.
So top 5. Honestly, the first 4 for me were simple. The 5th one, and I think you and I both agreed on this, is that you can probably flip 5 a couple of different ways, maybe even 4 because of how good the Indians have done. But top 5, I have number 1, the Dodgers, number 2, the Astros, 3, the Yankees, 4, the Twins, 5, I have the Braves. Braves still a division leader. That division becoming very, very odd all of a sudden. The NL East is one that could really become fun to watch, especially because I think now the Phillies are quickly becoming a team that everybody wants to just watch implode because of some of the things they've done, and it's just kind of again there was so much expectation. It's similar to when LeBron James went to the Heat. You kind of want to see that first year where they just struggle, and you think it's going to be, this is going to be the year. We got it. No, you don't. It's not all just as easy as you think it is.
Right.
Again, the window is wide open for a couple of years. They just need to make sure they actually hit it within the next couple of years. Bottom 3, this is not just based off of record because the Marlins have a terrible record, and we expect them to be terrible. But I'm going to go with the Detroit Tigers, the Pittsburgh Pirates. A team that really I am disappointed in is the Pittsburgh Pirates. And lastly, a team that I had much higher expectations for. No, I am not putting the Nationals in my bottom three, but the Colorado Rockies absolutely are in my bottom three. There is no – I cannot make any excuses to why in the heck they are on the bottom of the National League West. That is just a really, really hard one to deal with.
Well, interestingly enough, I think we stand pat on our top five: Dodgers, Yankees, Astros, Twins, Braves.
Okay, yeah. And again, and you put Yankees too?
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's we could argue the semantics of 2 and 3. It was pretty much a 2A and a 2B. I'm good with that.
Right. And like we said earlier, you could make good arguments for teams like the Tampa Bay Rays and the Oakland Athletics, the Cleveland Indians at this point.
Right. Hell, the Mets were trying to make their way into the discussion.
The Mets are another excellent example of a team you could make a case for, because the Metis are 9-1 in their last 10,
something like that. Yeah,
and they're sneaking up there in the East, but I think Tampa Bay's probably going to be able to stay ahead of them, and of course the Yankees are out of reach at this point. My bottom three, and here's where we're going to be a little different. Mine is also not based just on position in the division or current record. I picked one of these teams because they are just bad right now.
Okay.
And there's a couple of teams on in the standings who have some really bad couple of weeks, but the Kansas City Royals, I know we expected them to be bad.
But 1-9 in their last 10.
1-9 in their last 10, and so are the LA Angels. But the LA Angels are struggling with injury and the loss of some major pieces. But the Kansas City Royals looked for a little while like they were at least going to give the White Sox a run for their third place money. And it just never materialized. Now they're just getting smacked around the yard all the time, and nobody wants that.
Yeah, I mean, when you're, the only reason that I kind of stood back, and here's the odd thing here, even with the Angels, their run differential is only minus 34.
Right, and the Kansas City Royals is minus 114.
Right, Tigers minus 215, which is kind of why I felt obligated to drop them in there. They have the worst run differential in the big leagues. Again, the Orioles and the Marlins, we know they're terrible. At some point, it's kind of just obligatory that they're horrific, and they don't qualify as MLB teams.
Sure. Oh, absolutely. I feel like the Orioles aren't even a 4A team, right? They're
Were they 2A.5?
Yeah, 2A.5.
They're triple A.5.
But one of the reasons I went with the Royals and not the Tigers, because I feel like the Tigers are absolutely committed to rebuild, right? And the Royals haven't really gotten there. So we expect the Tigers to be at the bottom of that division. This is a rebuild era for them. They are not ready to compete. We don't expect them to compete. They're worse than the Orioles, which, is hard. I really thought the Orioles were going to finish this season as the worst team in baseball, but they got 3 games on them. My next one is disappointment. The Giants are in my next slot. And only because I'm disappointed that they went on such a hot run in the second half of the season. They went 16-2 right after the break. And they were winning games with the team they have, with the guys they have. They didn't trade for anybody major. I mean, the panic DFA thing was a big deal. The pickup of Scooter Gennett was a big deal. But other than that, they didn't make any major moves. Their bullpen was firing on all cylinders. Their starting rotation was firing on all cylinders. Then they go ahead and move Melanson, and they're 3-7 in their last 10, and they have lost all their momentum. And the only team that I look at and I go, I'm more disappointed in this team than I am in the Giants is the same as yours, the Colorado Rockies. I think the Rockies absolutely deserve to be in the bottom three. There is no excuse with the way that team is stacked on paper for them to be in the bottom of this division.
Especially with the expectations that we had, and they were very low for the Giants. Mm-hmm. And we both agreed.
Right.
And I think we both agreed the Padres were a team that you had them. I think I had them at the bottom of the West, and you had them maybe 3 or 4.
I think I had them 3.
I think you had them right near 500. And for me, the thing with them is they were a very, very young team trying to gel a bunch of pieces together and looking at bringing up a couple of rookies, and yet still they're 54 and 61. Not great. I still think that the whole Machado thing may end up backfiring, but at the end of the deal right now, this is a team who this was not supposed to be their year. This was supposed to be Manny Machado is going to be our cornerstone as far as player and power goes, and we'll work it around from that point. And you did that. And it should take you, this should be we have unlatched the windows and we're starting to go ahead and raise them. And you should have a little bit of time before the spring wears out and comes crashing down.
Right.
So that's okay. And the Giants with the Jeanette thing, I mean, he's coming off of an injury-plagued year. He's only played in 29 games this entire season. But, it is – I mean, it wouldn't take much for, the Cardinals to drop into it. I mean, the Cardinals right now are 3-7 in their last 10. They're, four games over 500. So it's one of those things where we have a bunch of teams who have played well, have found themselves in odd predicaments. I'm not really down with you on the Giants one. Because to me, the run they went on should be more surprising than expecting them to stay on that run. That's the only thing I would say there. I get as a fan, it's probably a big slap in the face of, you get your hopes up, you think there's something possibly there, and then all of a sudden they begin to go back and do Giants things. But I'm not as surprised and hurt by it as you are. But again, your affinity for them is much different than mine is.
Right. My affinity for them is much different than yours. That's true. Also, I think one of the things that made like me or other Giants fans think, hey, maybe this is for real, is the players that they have were playing the way that they should be playing, right? Panda was playing well, and Posey was playing well. Madison Bumgarner was pitching well.
Sure.
And those are the things you expect from them. None of those players, maybe not Panda, but none of those players really are past their prime or their ability to play at a high level. And there are a lot of names on that team that should still be playing at a high level. And I think that's what made everybody stop and think, hey, maybe they found it again, right? Maybe they've picked it back up again, and we can move on from here, and we can from where we were, and we can watch these guys play at the level that we expect them to play at.
Yeah, I get it. I mean, I think at the end of it, though, you're just,
and then no.
Yeah, they're just hitting a point where they just kind of lost their stride, and it was kind of that. It feels like, I hate to keep using the word, but the window closed, and at the end of it, here's the I think the biggest problem is that's okay. It's okay the window closed. It has to, but you have kept so many of the same personnel that it makes you feel as though the window still is open, that it's still actually there for you to make one last run And the last 3 seasons have proven that there is no one last run with this group.
Sure.
Especially if Bochy's retiring, and that doesn't galvanize these men to go ahead and, win one for Boch. Let's try and take him out at least through October. When that's not there, it's not a slight on Bruce Bochy, and it's not a slight on the team. It just means, we're at a point now where maybe we're holding on to these guys a bit longer than we should have, because we thought that, well, okay, we missed the every other year thing. Maybe we have one more chance. And now you know what? You don't. And your bullpen failed you in a way that you didn't expect, horrifically failed you in a way that you didn't expect. You made the move for Melanson. That didn't work. Again, not expected based on the money that you paid. And it was one of those things where they made some moves that I think were, in some cases, were really, really good moves, and they just didn't pan out. And that's okay. But it's now time to go ahead and start doing what you need to do to get yourself prepared for another window.
Some of the moves that they made were terrible.
Right.
Absolutely terrible. There's no reason why we needed to go out and pick up Evan Longoria to play third base for us. There's no reason. He's past his prime. I mean, maybe not. Maybe that's rough. Maybe past his prime is rough. But
he wasn't past his prime, but you didn't need to go out and get a guy who was owed the amount of money that Longo was when you're on the hook for most of it. I mean, Longo is, to a point, Longo is Panda, right? He was the Rays' Pablo Sandoval. Now, I think that Longoria could have potentially ended up being a Hall of Famer, and maybe somehow down the line it could happen, but he was not a 238 kind of guy, the whole time when he was in Tampa Bay, and he was very, very comfortable there.
Right. I think that it could be, what do you want to call it? A home team bias or whatever it is you want to call it.
Sure.
It causes me to be more disappointed than I think you are in this kind of sudden fall off where they were doing really well, playing great baseball, fun to watch baseball, and then it's just fallen off the cliff again, almost like all out 2016, right, when they were playing really good baseball at the start of the year, all the way through the first half, and then they just imploded. I think a lot of people were hoping this was going to be the exact opposite.
Yeah, it came close. So that, I think that's where we sit. I get it, and we'll run through real fast if we're running long, and we don't want to keep you guys too much. We are going to start making a concerted effort to hold this under the hour, because stats show that basically podcasts over an hour, everyone kind of just quits. So we're going to start trying to. I'm going to start trying to hold the windedness down. But in the East, in the American League, Yankees, Rays, Red Sox, Blue Jays, Orioles, right where we expected. The Indians and Twins tied at 70 and 46 at the top spot. The White Sox, the Royals, and the Tigers rounded out. The White Sox, 12 games under 500. They could make a decent run. I mean, this is not a terrible record for the White Sox. The Astros command the West. The A's, a half game out of the wild card. That makes it a whole hell of a lot of fun. The Rangers, Angels, and Mariners round out that division. Currently, the Atlanta Braves sitting in the top spot. The Washington Nationals. Holy hell, everybody! I just said it. The Washington Nationals hold the top spot in the wild card. Yes, they hold a one-game lead for the top wild card spot in the National League. You have the Mets, Phillies, and Marlins rounding out the back end. The Mets are only a half game behind the Milwaukee Brewers, who currently hold the second wild card spot. The Cubs sit on top of the division by 2 games. Cubbies, Brewers, Cardinals trying to find a way, and they also are a half game back. The Reds and the Pirates, and the Dodgers, Diamondbacks, Giants, Padres, and the Rockies round out the bottom side of the National League West. And yeah, this is the crazy thing right now is in the AL, it's all but over, right? The Red Sox 5.5 games out of the wild card, and the A's are a half game. That's pretty much where it's going to sit, as the Indians and the Twins are tied, so you don't know who's going to be the leader there, and then the Rays. But in the National League, holy hell! The Reds 4.5 games out, the Giants 3.5, the Diamondbacks 1.5, the Phillies 1, the Mets and the Cardinals a half game, and the Nationals and the Brewers would go into the wild card game if the season ended today. That is going to be a race. That is still the beauty of the 2 wild card system in Major League Baseball.
Sure. I think we're going to have a lot of fun here.
Yeah.
Coming up to September and October. And
you know who's not is Tim Beckham.
That is true. Tim Beckham is not going to have a good time, is he? Because he won't be playing.
That's right. Guys, thanks for hanging out with us today. It was great to have you along again. Second week back of the show. Like you said, we told you it was going to be consistent. Hopefully this is starting to show you that we actually are not kidding about it. And if you are a Yankees or Red Sox fan, hope you appreciated the Brian Cashman jokes, because we sure did. Nothing like having just a little bit of fun. At the end of it, guys, have a great week. Enjoy yourselves. Man, we are into August. That means only 2 more months until the season is going to come to an end. So just keep enjoying yourselves. We are over the 100-game mark in Major League Baseball, and don't worry, we will be here to take you all the way through October and into the off season of 2019. For all of us here at the Grueling Truth Network, for Chris, I'm Graham saying so long, and see you next week on Out of Left Field.